investment has tripled, the trade has also doubled. So we are here because of the corresponding PAs that was concluded 10 years ago. And also at the May summit meeting, there have been some announcements by our Korean companies like SK Innovations, LG, also Hyundai Automobiles for further investments here in the United States on the areas of automobiles, semiconductors, and also batteries. So these are they were possible because we see the market increasing here in the United States. I was very happy to visit Atlanta, Georgia, when I visited here in July. President Wood also visited Atlanta. He visited the SK battery plants, but I was very fortunate to be offered to visit Georgia Atlanta Kia automobile plant. And it is quite amazing because
the question is whether that
they have set up the plants, which is very beneficial to the community. And also they design the very famous Kia automobile Telluride, which was designed in San Francisco, manufactured in Atlanta plants, and also exported to other countries. This embodies the very model of how the two countries work together in terms of investment. And I just heard that there was also another announcement by the SK Innovations with the joint ventures of the Ford to build new battery plants in Kentucky and Tennessee. So we are going to see a lot more investments from our Korean companies, which will create jobs here and also contribute to the transformations of the U.S. economy into a green economy. So we are working with the governments also together in order to see whether there would be more incentives from the federal government and also from the state governments. It will be very crucial for our investment companies to settle well and also succeed here in the long term. Also in the areas of supply chains, we have been working very closely with our counterparts here in the different sectors in terms of the batteries and also in the semiconductors, rare earths, to secure a very stable long-term growth in those areas. Supply chain is very important these days because we have been engaged and dependent on the safety of the and also very efficient supply chain. So I think we will have a lot of work to do in the future. Well, in the areas of science and technologies, the two leaders have agreed on the various areas of critical and emerging technologies such as 5G telecommunications, 6G, and also AI, data, and also quantum technologies. So we are working very closely with different agencies, ministries, and academia in order to build up the platforms and also institutional arrangements in order to identify where we can build up on those technological advancements. But what is very much very important and critical is the exchange of the people that embody those talents and also the knowledge. So I think it is very important that we build upon the face-to-face, person-to-person exchanges that we have in the countries. So that's why there is a bill pending on the Hill called the Partners with Korea Act, which limits our talents to have secure visa for professionals so that our students who have been studying
considered enabling
in
technologies
the
for
US to
the future
have
digital
to
transformation.
secure the jobs
I
that
also presented the differences between the US,
so I hope
Europe,
that there
and
will be
China,
a lot of
how they are integrating artificial
discussions that
intelligence
would be
into
able to help us
different
as a government
knowledge and
to
competences and
form and create
scientific
the right
results. For example,
arrangements
in the
and
US, they are investing very much in developing artificial intelligence for humanities,
to work
while
together.
in China, they are
very
investing
much
in
happy to
developing
listen
artificial
to any
intelligence for
proposal
agriculture
and
application, for
questions.
producing food, for example. So globalization has obtained some results in terms of being socially connected, but in terms of geopolitics, we still see many differences in also in how the digital transformation is implemented in the society.
International collaboration
Then I
is
spoke
absolutely
about
vital component to make sure that there are
robotics and
positive
how
impacts for
the
science and
journey of
technology.
robotics is
It brings
coming
together
into us,
minds with
because
science and
robotics
technology
was
and resources
developed
from
for
diverse backgrounds
manufacturing
to
countries
advance
for
our understanding of the world
industrial
around us
production,
and address
and
global
robots
challenges.
are in
More minds
manufacturing
working
plants,
together
but
in those same
in
problems
recent
can
years,
answer
what
those
we
problems,
have
questions
seen is the
faster and help
development
to
of
progress and
service
accelerate
robotics, which is
solutions.
intended to
But these
support
collaborations also
services
need to
and
be
the offer
on
of
the
services
foundation of
in
shared
terms of medical
values
robotics,
like
social
transparency,
robotics,
reciprocity,
educational
diversity,
robotics. And now
inclusion,
what is
equity,
happening
and
is that
openness,
robotics is
which help us to
coming
ensure that
into our
cooperation
houses
going forward
by
has both
introducing
security,
some
safety, and
consumer
benefits for all.
products, and also
We know that the United
producing
States and the Republic of
changes in
Korea
the
are strong
society
partners
in
who
terms
both
of,
share these values, and we deeply appreciate the
autonomous
science and
drive
technology
or
cooperation
different
with the United
products that
States and
are
ROK
revolutionizing
Science and
business
Technology
and
Agreement has afforded us,
revolutionizing our
and are
life.
thankful that it is going strong now and over its 20th year. In the same summit that she alluded to, but President Biden and Moon earlier this year gave an excellent direction for science and technology cooperation for the two countries, and we committed to areas like quantum and AI, but as well as clean energy and other emerging tech areas. Our science and technology relationship is strong, and we are working together in these directions through engagements, through things like our joint committee meetings, as well as other opportunities through the interagency and science and cooperation. In our most recent meeting held in December of 2020, we covered such topics as research integrity to make sure that our systems are interoperable and strengthen the science and technology enterprise during COVID-19. My colleagues in the Department of State's Economics Bureau and Business Affairs also are engaging Korea in digital economy issues such as 5G and Open RAN on an ongoing basis, culminating in the US ROK ICT Policy Forum. And we're hoping that the sixth round of this dialogue can be scheduled very near in the future. We're also looking to expand digital connectivity and build cybersecurity capacity in the Indo-Pacific region together, including through cooperation in our development partnership. There are so many more elements to be able to celebrate in our science and technology innovation collaboration. In May, Korea became the 10th nation to sign on to the Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords are non-binding set of principles that govern space behaviors and will enable interoperability of the US and ROK GPS, global positioning systems. In communication, the Korean Institute of Information Communications Technology Planning and Evaluation and the United States Science and Science Foundation signed the MOU on 6G and future wireless technologies just earlier this year. Both of our countries have engaged in so many areas, including infectious disease research, which is of the highest importance right now. But not only just on COVID-19, but also research looking at tuberculosis, antimicrobial resistance, and HIV/AIDS, as well as looking at the human and animal health interface, where the U.S. Geological Survey worked with Korea to stand up the first National Wildlife Disease Control Center just last year. On energy collaboration, the Department of Energy and Korea have had many successful years of collaboration on the Korean superconducting tokamak advanced research, or KSTAR, to reach advanced fusion technology, which will be imperative and as we look forward to solving the energy challenges of today and tomorrow. These past, present, and future collaborations align well with the U.S. domestic science, technology, and innovation priorities, which include pandemic preparedness, prevention, tackling climate change, catalyzing research and development in critical and emerging technologies, innovation, equity, and national security and economic resilience. In line with values that I mentioned earlier, the Biden-Harris administration is working to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as well as scientific integrity, STEM education, workforce development, and research responsibility in the United States and in the global science and technology enterprise system. Given the global nature of both scientific research and the transnational nature of the challenges that we face, whether we're talking about pandemics, climate change, or even the basics of physical research, we'll be unable to succeed in this mission without close cooperation from our allies and partners. We are also recognize the challenges that equity and opportunity deal with our own domestic systems and science, and we are committed to being able to work with marginalized and underrepresented groups. I know that we have a full panel discussion here momentarily, but I wanted to touch on a few topics to be able to highlight with AI. For example, on AI technologies, we believe that AI can uplift and empower all people. The United States seeks to promote responsible design, development, and deployment of AI in line with democratic values and human rights, which I know are values shared with our Korean counterparts. And with quantum information sciences, the United States is taking a science-first approach, which means that we are prioritizing strong investment in basic research and technological breakthroughs, and we're very interested in being able to compare the approaches that the Koreans are taking at this time so that we can look at our shared interests in this area and opportunities for engagement.
Well, I'm delighted to...
The same is true in biotechnologies. The United States is prioritizing safe, secure, and sustainable biomanufacturing and innovation, biotechnology research and development, and working together with like-minded partners and allies like you, we hope to foster a vibrant and secure global bioeconomy that addresses international concerns and emergencies, including pandemics, natural disasters, and climate change. I look forward to continuing this discussion and for future collaboration with the group for many years to come with our positive U.S. Republic of Korea science and technology collaboration.
Particularly the economic development around the world. That's message number one. My second message will have to do with the much more longer term consequences of short-term
for this
policies
prestigious forum.
mechanisms, and that is really the consequences of climate change. I believe that many of the issues that we're debating at the moment will mean absolutely nothing in 20 years' time if we have not acted now in order to make sure that the planet remains
And also
something
the
that is
comprehensive
habitable
partnership
for our
for
children and grandchildren.
infrastructure.
And my third message, which will not surprise any of those who know me or my friends, will have to do with inequality, and in particular the inequality
In time of
that women have
confrontation
to suffer and have had to suffer for a long time.
United States,
While inequality as such is a major disruption, I believe that by addressing women's situation and the inequality that they face, it will help quite a way
based on shared values.
So we'll try to do that.
The value was mentioned in the joint statement is that democracy and also the rule of law and human rights protection.
We're living through an era of rapid and disruptive change.
But at the same time, China has also taken countermeasures.
And what we're seeing is that nowhere is that
China
disruption more
introduced
evident
a series of actions, for example,
We're all familiar with the
investment
extreme events, the temperature rises,
and also
the
export
inexorable
control
change that
rules.
we're seeing in Chinese ecology as a result
And
of climate change.
China also introduced a new concept of comprehensive security,
Decarbonization of our energy system,
traditional
which accounts for about two-thirds of carbon emissions. How
and
will that
other areas.
impact climate change, and can we
With that in mind,
energy transition era rapidly
supply chains
mitigate
would
carbon
be
that
easily
will take us to a
decoupled
safe
from
future?
this
This is already happening.
situation.
Renewable energy
And,
today is cost competitive on the grid.
Actually, this is the collision of the systems,
33% of
which
capacity
is
power
state
generation
capitalism
is the fastest growing
on the
segment,
side of
and
China,
costs are
and also
increasing
market
decreasing
on the side of United
So what
States.
we're going to see is a rapid movement towards
In order to
transition
ensure
that's also going to be disruptive
supply
for
chain
business models
resilience,
of today.
I think
It's going to imply new
we have to bear in mind
among countries.
3 points.
As countries move away
Number one,
from resource-dependent fossil fuel-based
Actually,
systems,
United States is
energy
working
systems,
together with the allies in order to ensure supply chains.
technology
Then the
innovation,
close
and
consultation with its allies is very necessary. US is working with these allies, but some of the allies are located in very vulnerable situations, because of their economic dependence.
The low carbon economy should come because to avoid the climate change, serious effort is necessary. Many of the governments are trying the new technologies, new regulations, new rules to move to that direction. But the IEA, International Energy Agency, assessed the current effort is not enough. We need much more efforts to introduce new technologies about renewables or carbon-related technologies, efficiency in the difficult sector, in the industry, and the new regulations. So we need really double or triple our efforts to make it happen. One of the areas which IEA focus on is hydrogen. Hydrogen can be used to store the electricity generated by wind or solar, which is very volatile, and storage is the key element. So battery may not necessarily be enough, so hydrogen can be used. And also hydrogen can be used for steel, cement, some of the industries where the decarbonization is very difficult. So that's another area. The third one will be the hydrogen could be the new transformation for the sectors of the oil or gas producing country. If they can remove carbon dioxide from oil or gas or coal, then these hydrocarbon change into the very friendly climate-friendly resources. So this may prevent the hydrocarbon as a stranded asset. So maybe the hydrogen is one of the key areas. We need lots of infrastructure building, technologies are necessary, but hydrogen may give us a good chance to achieve the sustainable future.
Therefore, if China moves first, then the United States should also take positions to counter these actions. Lastly, the digital technology. In order to manage and monitor the supply chains, the role of the digital technology is quite important. In Asia Pacific, we have witnessed the emergence of several types of digital trade rules, ranging from USMCA, CPTPP, and also Singapore-Australian digital agreement, and Singapore, New Zealand, and Chilean digital agreement are emerging. But these digital rules are very much fragmented without presence of the United States. There is a very strong need to ensure supply chains resilience. The standardization of the digital technologies are very much required, and we look forward to
unfortunately, there is a model of story which works. If you think of the
many experts are suggesting that
that's a story where you're putting together evidence and you're telling
take the
people
initiative to have a plurilateral agreement on digital trade rules. But so far, actually, we haven't heard from the US government.
And so a lot of the challenge of dealing with disinformation is presenting the story of how the disinformation was created, how was the trick done, and you can lead people on the story and you can show them this person is telling you that
so much. It's a really pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be with my Korean colleagues today.
But actually,
I just want to make a couple of generalized framing remarks and then go into a couple of specific things I think that cooperation is useful in. The U.S. didn't need to really worry about cooperation 30 years ago because we were dominant, but we were sensitized to the next time around. The best technology economy on the planet, even capabilities in virtually every area, and so we didn't. And China wasn't even on the map. We had no real
not just today,
foreign policy challenges. We had technological.
And so really dealing with disinformation.
That's all very different today. The U.S. now spends less on R&D than we did as a share of GDP than that were prior to Sputnik, which solved the problems from 54. That's Congress is trying, and the Biden administration are trying to turn that around. Who knows? We'll see where it goes. So we don't have as many domestic resources, which means we need to keep partnering more. Secondly, the whole process of innovation has gotten much more complex, much more difficult. My colleague Nick Bloom and John Van Reenen, Nick was at Stanford, they did a really groundbreaking research study a few years ago where they looked at the productivity of research.
One of the greatest
what they found was that it's harder each year to get the same technological breakthrough as it was the year before. Now, that's not because scientists have gotten lazy,
very, very
because the
strong
technology
economic
challenges have
force
gotten
and
harder.
for innovation.
Good example of that when they talk about
As
early
more and
70s,
people
assuming
move
one
into cities
engineer
and
to
metro
get
areas.
a Moore's Law advancement for Intel. Today it's
Urban areas
72
were important
engineers.
during the
72
industrial
times
era,
as many
but
engineers
they
to
are
get a Moore's Law
increasingly
advancement.
important
So just things are much more complicated, they're much more difficult. And then finally, obviously, China.
Especially for a person
China
like
is
me
not,
who comes from a
as
small
IFPI has
city
written
like
for
Stockholm,
over a
is
decade,
that
they're
there
not
seem to
a
be
normal
room
country.
for
And by that I mean a
cities
country that has
outside the
reasonable
megacities as
technology
well.
policies
There are some
and relies
really
on the market. They're not,
drivers
that's not
of
what they do.
innovation that are
What we would
smaller
term
or
innovation
mid-sized
mercantilist
cities,
economy that doesn't
amongst
play by the
which
rules.
Stockholm is
And
actually one.
they
There
have,
are a number of
on
examples.
top of that,
And
they
what
have
is important
a
if
goal
a
in
city
our view
wants
of
to become
technological
an
autarky.
outlier
They want
or
to
a
be
hub for
dominant,
innovation
not just
is
good, want to be
collaboration.
dominant in virtually every
If you
single
look at
advanced
urban
technology.
innovation especially,
So that's different than, say,
you need
Korea,
to
where
have
you're
strong
really good at,
public,
I don't know,
private
6, 7 areas, you pick them
the mayor
really good. But you don't
needs
pretend
to
you're good. You're not trying to make
people
wide-body
from
aircraft.
private sector, from
You're going to leave
academia,
that up
other
to the U.S. and
stakeholders
Europe.
around the table
So you have a division of labor. The Chinese don't do that.
problems. And I think
So
we
I think
see that
there's
quite
two
a lot
kinds of
in
cooperation we
step
can
right
have.
now.
One
And I
is
hope we
more
see
traditional
more of it going
diplomatic cooperation and development. So could we have agreements with countries in Africa or Latin America? Those are all good. But I think what we need to be thinking about is a new kind of partnership, which is more around the area of competitiveness, rather than just sort of foreign policy. Let's just do this because we want to have better relationships with Chile or something. We need to be thinking about partnerships more strategically. How can we build really strong partnerships to build up our capabilities and our partners' capabilities, particularly vis-a-vis China? So let me suggest a few areas. Building a little bit on what the ambassador said. Number one, I think we need more cooperation on export controls. The Chinese are masters at playing countries and companies off against each other. I think we need more cooperation in terms of confronting Chinese subsidies. It's going to be very hard, for example, for SK and Samsung in memory if the Chinese continue to pour tens of billions of dollars just writing checks to memory factories. At minimum, it's going to flood the market and reduce margins. I think also in terms of can we have more cooperation between our companies so that we're not hijacked and forced to transfer technology to the Chinese. The Chinese know that they have companies over a barrel because if Samsung doesn't do it, they'll get Intel to do it. So we could cooperate there. I think in supply chain areas, yes, I agree we can't and probably shouldn't think about a complete decoupling in supply chains with China. But we have, if the Chinese wanted to, they could really throw a monkey wrench into our affairs. They could hold us hostage. And we could probably do the same thing with them on certain things. So mutually assured destruction, if you will, of the supply chain world. But I think we should be thinking collectively, how do we reduce that dependency? And I think joint supply chain mapping efforts are critical. I think in terms of technology cooperation, one is, we have a set of university research centers that we fund through mostly NSF, but DOE, DOD. Why can't we be thinking about allowing Korean universities with support, an American center, so a particular center on 6G. We could have partners from both sides on a center like that. I think another area would be the U.S. is going to increasingly move towards pre-competitive industry research grants and centers. In areas, we're already doing that with our Manufacturing USA centers, things like process technology and biotech, 3D printing. It seems like there's an opportunity to jointly partner with what Korea is doing there. And the last thing I'll say, partnership is, at the end of the day, it's fundamentally about trust. And it's about the view that together we're going to be better than we are separately. And I would just encourage, or caution perhaps, my Korean friends, don't go down the European path. I know we have the European Tech and Trade Council tomorrow, this meeting in Pittsburgh, and while I'm hopeful and optimistic there'll be some good things that come out of that, underlying that is a very, very deep suspicion and disappointment with what Europe has done. Europe has articulated what they call technological sovereignty, and that's directed at U.S. companies. They have a whole set of data policies directed at the U.S. economy to limit what we can do. They're using antitrust as a weapon, and many, many other things. And I don't mean to say that they're nefarious people. They're pursuing that agenda. I get it. But that has reduced the trust on the U.S. side with Europe. And so I would encourage us in Korea, particularly in the data area, that you think through, as the ambassador said, could we get an Asian data partnership?
Hello, I'm Megan O'Sullivan. I am the new chair of the North America Group of the Trilateral Commission. I wanted to take this opportunity to say a few words about the Commission and about our future. As you may know, the Trilateral Commission is a storied institution, an organization with 46 years of history. History of having an impact on big ideas, on bringing people together across different sectors and across 3 different geographies, that of North America, Europe, and Asia. But we are on the cusp of a new chapter, one that builds on that history, but really reorients ourselves and puts us in a position to make an impact in a very, very different world. And the reason why I have such confidence that the Commission can remake itself is because there is a need, and the Commission is well suited to meet that need. And that need is quite simply that in this day and age, in these political landscapes, the need is simply for more organizations, more individuals, more entities to take up the mantle of defending a rules-based order, an order that values and is committed to democratic principles, ideas like free trade and human rights. And we also have a need for more ideas to help us tackle new challenges, or certainly challenges that are new to this generation. And there are many reasons why I think the Trilateral Organization is so well poised to meet this need. First and foremost, we are an organization that at its heart is a community of countries that share a common set of values, that share these commitments to these ideas about democracy, about free markets, about the rule of law. And secondly, we have a membership that spans policy, business, and academia and media. And that allows us to bring minds together and experience to bear on problems that are no longer just the purview of one of those sectors. The things that need to be thought about today and where we need new solutions and prescriptions are ones that are at the intersection of business and policy, whether it is the contributions that private sector organizations can make to combating climate change, whether it is figuring out the ideas that will drive the reform of capitalism, or whether it is understanding the impact of technology on our systems. All of these things need business, government, and others at the table to help with. Now, of course, to realize this potential for the Trilateral Organization to meet this need, we are going to have to do some things differently than we have in the past. First and foremost, we are going to have to recognize, as a group primarily of democracies, we need to spend some time looking at ourselves, looking internally, saying what's happening with our own institutions, what is the health of our own institutions, and how is that situation affecting our ability to cooperate across national lines and deliver global problems to pressing global solutions. So we're spending more time talking about things like populism and the impact of technology technology
their own societies.
Secondly, we've got to think about impact.
How is that going to be
Traditionally, we're an organization that has had impact based on the very nature of our relationships. We're an organization of people who have close ties to national governments, and often the ideas that we debate in private inform our own perspectives and inform our discussions and deliberations and conversations quickly actionable in positions of power. That will still be true, but today we need to think about having an impact on the broader debate. We no longer live in a world where governments are the only ones that can influence the future. In fact, increasingly, we have to think about other entities as being the real engines of change, and be that corporations or universities or even individuals. We need to think about how to shape the conversation, how to bring those groups in, to have investment in and commitment to solutions. And we need to move ahead whether or not we're able to get our governments to agree with our prescriptions and recommendations. So in short, it's a really exciting time to be part of the Trilateral Commission. I'm deeply honored to be the new chair of the North American Group, and I look forward to working with all our members and my colleagues from other regions to realize this vision. Thank you.
Secondly, the whole notion of how standards are developed. The Chinese are sort of come around to giving lip service to the notion that industry standards are voluntary and cooperative and industry-led. But fundamentally, they're manipulating that process. I don't think the Korean government goes to Samsung and says, you have to have this standard. I think that's something Samsung decides on their own, and that's what our companies do. That's not how it works in China. So, again, reaffirming that industry-led standards mean industry and companies decide on their own without coercion and without pressure. And then the last area would be around IT and the use by government. Clearly the Chinese abuse that data. I don't want to say it's Orwellian, but it's in the Orwellian ballpark, let's say. They use data to spy on their citizens, and we both reject that. The area where I worry that we can go with that, and I see the Europeans sometimes wanting to go there, is to say, well, having responsibility and human rights and all that means that we have to have a privacy law like the GDPR. And I fundamentally reject that notion. The U.S. has good privacy rules. Our companies comply. I don't think we should let that whole question be conflated with much more fundamental questions, which are really about how government uses data and do they use it in a way that respects their citizens' rights. And clearly the U.S. government uses data, the NSA uses data, the FBI uses data, but they use it in a legal framework that's very, very constrained, and we have legal rights, and Korea is the same, and I think that's we should be highlighting that big difference.
In those countries, the political parties are not moving free. So the real issue for the moving forward
Well, with regard to the digital economy and the data flows, I think it will be very important in the future that will dominate the economic systems and structures. I think there are areas where the stakeholders, as you said, and the market force to drive this trend. I mean, there are always new sources of economic, commercial profits for the companies to pursue, but also there are very sensitivities. There are also sensitivities in terms of data privacy, and it is a big concern for the Koreans also. So there should be a balanced approach, a holistic approach. But what is important is, as the value of democracy, human rights, transparency, those principles should be kept. And always, I think it is important that we have discussions open between the governments and industries and academias, and also in terms of the development of future technology. So I think we should keep in mind that we have discussions open to
The best way for companies to surf the digital revolution is to build trust with their customers,
There's a
build
proverb
trust with
in
their
Korea saying
employees.
that
One of the ways in
don't
which
hate
companies
your
can do that
mother-in-law
is
because
to
you're going
have
to
frank
be like your
conversations
mother-in-law
with
in
the
the future.
workforce, to sit
So I
down
think
with
we have
workers
too
and
much
their unions
focus on what
and to
China
say,
is
look, here's
doing
the
or what
challenges
China is
that
saying.
we're
But I
facing.
think
But
we should
importantly to ask then, how can we best get there? Because all too often, a lot of the solutions that a company can put in place that will make a real difference, the employees know the answer to
and
that.
try to strengthen our supply chains and resilience among the allies and partners.
Thank you. So since we cover supply chain, so I'd like to have a follow-up question on supply chain resilience actually.
Multilateralism
So I think
not
the
only
key
the
pillar
best,
of the U.S. supply
many
chain
cases,
policy
the
is
only way
building
in which you can
domestic
deal
manufacturing
with
capacity
global issues.
and by creating
Because we're
opportunities
dealing with
for
global
cooperation with
challenges, and
allies.
therefore you need
But
global
allies,
solutions.
as
You need
Director Lee
multilateral
mentioned,
solutions.
briefly from her opening remarks about
They
this,
take a little longer, yes, of course, but
co-investment
once
with
you get
SK
it,
innovation.
then they will
But
stick
at
around
the same time,
for
so
longer.
allies are interested in direct
You will
investment
get
in the
greater
United States
ownership,
for building the
and
domestic
therefore
production. But at the
you
same
will tend
time,
to have
they
more
also
effective
have their
solutions.
plans to increase
The
their
other way
domestic
is
production.
that,
And as
of course,
we've seen, from EU and Japan and South
unilateralism
Korea and semiconductor belt
is
is also
always
one
about
example that
who
South
is
Korea has been
stronger
doing.
in
And I
a
think,
bilateral
so just
relationship.
following up on
And
DG Lee just
therefore,
talk about
by
just
going
not just
multilateral,
focusing on
what you
South
do is you
China,
balance
I think there's a strategic
all the
opportunity
opinions
that
count.
the United States
Of
can
course, you
work
always
together
have
with
the
allies and
bigger
partners,
countries,
including South Korea, in the third
speak
country.
louder, but
So would you like to share
the
your
differences
suggestions?
are
What
less.
would be the key areas and
Also
opportunities and
the
challenges
needs
that
of
the
the smaller
U.S. and allies
countries,
and partners
the
can
needs
work
of the
together?
developing
And,
countries,
for example, like
the needs
Vietnam
of the
or other
groups
countries in
in a
Southeast Asia,
society that
US,
are lesser
Korea,
named,
do you think it's really
then they are
realistic
much
next
better
steps
addressed
to explore?
by a multilateral approach.
Can I start
So
with
yes,
Mr. Jack?
today we need
Actually,
multilateral more
Korea,
than before.
United States can work together in third country to promote the bilateral relations. In fact, in the joint statement made last May, clearly mentioned actually they have some indicative list of the cooperative works.
We have just concluded the meeting
For example,
on the
climate change
European section of the Thailand
challenges.
Commission. I think it's been a great meeting. I think we've been able to have a dialogue on
They could
a
work
lot of
together
the
with
issues that are
the energy
of
sectors
concern to all of us.
in
Where
both
are we going on the climate
They
issues?
can
How is the
share
digital transformation going? What is the security
technologies and
really
also,
going to look like?
they can
Digital
jointly
work? Where is
move to
Russia
third
heading?
country,
What are the Americans up to?
joint
What will be the consequences of Brexit?
But there are many other areas they could work
topic of concern to us Europeans at the moment,
particularly
on the agenda,
health
in
areas.
particular 2 days in Stockholm.
The Korea,
And then I think
US
we have also
formed
been
already
enjoying
vaccine
the company
partnership.
of this
They work
very
together,
diverse and very
very
interesting
closely in this area.
and
Then they
increasingly
could
young group that
share
is the
their
Trilateral Commission
experience
Europe.
with third countries in this area.
Thank you. Dr. Sigrid?
I really appreciate the creativity of being able to find these kind of trilateral opportunities. I agree absolutely with what you just said, but right now we're also exploring whether we can use some of the programs that the State Department has to be able to create these trilateral opportunities, whether it might be in health or in climate change, where we would take scientists from both the United States and Korea and put them together in a third-party country to be able to tackle some of those issues in a really tangible way. So I think that it's feasible both on maybe the more R&D or applied science focus, but as well as on some of the supply chain issues, being able to look at like semiconductors. How do you map those supply chains and say, is it necessarily in Southeast Asia where you would look for that third-party country, or if you're looking at chip production and manufacturing, are you necessarily going to be looking into Europe to be able to create that partnership that would satisfy within semiconductors?
So I think it's a difficult question. somewhat politically
Technology
because
is
the
not a threat to
domestic
democracy,
politics in
and
the
I
U.S.
believe that
are,
technology can
we just
enable
want to reshore
democratic
and attract.
principles
So,
of
hey,
freedom of
LG's putting a
speech,
factory in,
freedom of
fantastic,
assembly,
and we want to
really
reshore a
freedom of
bunch of U.S.
information
stuff
so
from
that we
China.
can make smart decisions
That's easier said than
about
done.
how
It's not going to
where we
happen.
want to take the
No
future
matter
of
what
our
we do,
countries.
we're not
I
going to
think
be
we
able
have to
to
be mindful of
take
how
the
the
China
technology
production
can be
system
used
and
against
use it
us
as
and
possible.
educate our citizens
What we
about
should try
those
to do,
risks.
though, in my view,
But
is
I
we
think
should try to weaken the
technology
Chinese
truly is an
production
enabler
system
of our society,
and
we should continue to
strengthen
embrace it,
places
not
like
refrain from it.
Vietnam and India. Because if we do that, the reason I say that is these are part of the advantage you have in China is wages. They're still lower than Korea's wages. They're still lower than U.S. wages. The second advantage China has now is that they have spent the last 30 years buying up pieces of the supply chain, getting them there, and then once they're there, there's this complex ecosystem that's really, really hard to walk away from. So if you look at the surveys of U.S. companies, many of them are like, we're not leaving China. We can't. If we go to India, it's like just us. So I think we have to think a little more strategically. Are there components of that supply chain that could, with support from both countries, maybe Vietnam, and we say, let's do electronic assembly in Vietnam, and we work together on that. And you can't do this, but you can encourage your factories, your companies to put their facilities there. We can encourage ours there. We might have some incentives. But I think we have to be strategic about weakening China's position in some of these things, because right now the gravity is so strong. It's a centripetal force, not centrifugal. So we have to make it more centrifugal.
Well, first I want to emphasize that the supply chains is not only about bringing back the manufacturing industries back in the United States, but actually maximizing the whole supply chains that we have around the world. Especially our administration has been promoting our South Asian policies and South Asian policies plus for the past 4 or 5 years, and that means that we have put a lot of investments and have had a comprehensive relationship and partnership with the ASEAN countries. So we have invested in Indonesia recently by the Hyundai automobiles for electric cars. We have Vietnam with the investments by Samsung on the electronic goods and semiconductors. We have Malaysia working on the solar cells with our and LG chemicals. So we have a very good basis in ASEAN countries around. So in terms of having the supply chains very secure and resilient, it means that we have to work together with those partners around the world. And also, I think I have heard a lot about this industrial policies in the United States, which is quite unfamiliar vocabulary. And I just want to caution that all these investments and technological corporations should be market-driven, and also the voices of the business should be heard more carefully in terms of the investments, because they are quite aware of the cost in having investments here in the United States. So there are a lot of work to do in terms of the government's incentives, but also I think the logistics issue and the labor shortage is also another problem that the U.S. also have to solve in order to attract more investments from outside.
Thank you. So, Ambassador Che, I'd like to follow quickly. So you mentioned about CPTPP earlier, and so given that both China and Taiwan announced that they're going to join CPTPP, do you think that would really change the regional geopolitics and economic architecture? And given your deep expertise on trade issues, what would you think the role of Taurus FTA would play a role in this current changing environment.
In order to project its influence to the neighboring countries, China already promoted Made in China 2025, and as you just told earlier on, dual circulation economy, promoting domestic market at the same time, interacting with foreign countries, and also the One Belt, One Road initiative to neighboring countries. And on top of that, China joined RCEP, that is ASEAN, 10 countries plus 6 spoke countries. And then China announced its intention to join the CPTPP. That means China is building up multi-layer the regional cooperation architecture in order to expand their influence. The question is whether Chinese intention to join CPTPP would be feasible or would be easily acceptable by CPTPP 11 countries. And that is a good question because in the CPTPP has several provisions, chapters, for example, state-owned enterprises chapter. In my personal view, China may have a lot of difficulties complying with these provisional obligations. And another difficulty China would confront would be the non-market economy status provisions, which are appearing in USMCA. USMCA, it's a US-Mexico-Canada agreement, prohibits those three countries to have a bilateral free trade agreement with non-market economy countries, that is China. Therefore, actually Mexico and Canada may have difficulties accepting China as a member of CPTPP. But in spite of that, China's move is very much strategic, political. They may have difficulties in joining the CPTPP, but in order to join the CPTPP, China may enter into negotiations with some countries, promoting their influence to CPTPP members. Now the question is United States. In the Asia Pacific, there are a growing number of regional architectures participated by China on the one hand, but on the other, the United States pulled from TPP, and then U.S. voluntarily reduced its influence, projecting this region. And many U.S. allies in Asia Pacific would like to see that U.S. would become back to this area as an institutional actor. Of course, the U.S. is very much active in Indo-Pacific strategies, but that comprises only 4 countries. But there are also many other allies outside of the Pacific. Of course, in this sense, U.S. may work together with Korea, Indo-Pacific strategy, and then Korea's southern and northern policy. There are some complementary, actually, these two strategies. That would be a kind of area for future cooperation. But you mentioned about the Chorus FTA. Korea-US FTA is a backbone in promoting economic cooperation between the two countries because this FTA is the highest quality free trade agreement, sharing the same values between the two countries. And US may expand the quality of Chorus FTA to other neighboring countries in Asia Pacific. That could be used as a good benchmark to expand the US interest.
So I'd like to follow up. You mentioned U.S. trade and another council it's going to be difficult, which you have written a piece recently, right? You have written a piece recently, right? You have written a piece recently on this issue. You wrote something, right? So given that right now we're at the stage of listening for this issue, and you said that there's a need for the United States and EU to push back against China's digital authoritarian regime, right? And despite potential retaliation, right? So, and Ambassador Che mentioned the dilemma that Korean economy is facing, and actually the private companies, they have to balance between their national security calculations and commercial interests. So, what would be your suggestions or advice to Korea and Korean companies with regard to these issues?
Keep your head down. Look, I think I always remember the story. I was co-chair of the U.S.-China Innovation Experts Group in the Obama administration for about 5 or 6 years, and talking with them. And we were over in Beijing, ahead of the SNED dialogue, it was an innovation dialogue, and I was having lunch with some Chinese counterparts, fairly senior official, and I said, aren't you worried about the U.S. pushing you? No, not really. We can hold our own against the U.S. I said, what about the G20? He said, no. There's 19 other countries. They all fight among each other. He said, what we worry about is the G2. I said, what do you mean? He said, what we really worry about is Europe and America ganging up on us. And I think ultimately that, first of all, I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately, because I don't think the Europeans have the spine to do it, the courage. They will let us fight their battles for them. But I think ultimately, Brexit, countries like the U.S. and the EU as a region, we have to really step up. And once we do that, makes a safe space for countries like Korea. I think Japan also is a little bit farther out than Korea, and Japan could engage in that sort of trilateral effort. And to be clear what I mean by that, I don't mean punishing China for the sake of punishing China. What I mean by that is having them systematically roll back their whole giant suite of unfair anti-market technology mercantilist practices. So, I think once hopefully there's a bigger critical mass, and once it's there, I hope Korea could help. But right now, you're right in the middle of two behemoths. You don't want to have that fight. I would argue.
So I'd like to ask a final question to security and foreign policy cooperation. So I don't think I'm a big fan of just drawing the line between in terms of gender diversity, but I think it's true that it's not one of the usual panel that we have like 3 women on one panel, right? So from the joint statement, President Biden and President Moon place a particular emphasis on women, right? In the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So would you like to elaborate on those, and would you like to share anything, in terms of the bilateral cooperation, or what U.S. and South Korea is doing in terms of global goods?
Dramatic economic change that is adding to
with regard to women's economic empowerment, I think it is a very important subject that we haven't really built in the past as one of the agendas for the bilateral cooperations. We have a mechanism with the State Departments called Senior Economic Dialogue that checks on all the economic issues regularly at the vice minister's level. And for the past 2 years, I think we had the action plan agreed by from the summit meetings on the women's economic empowerment. It has elapsed, and this time I would like to start again with a more concrete projects, especially now the ESG is an important issue for the business communities. So I would like to see more business people, women, business communities to kind of come together and to have to create a network or platform where they can And also we are trying to build a program for the women in STEM areas with our universities students for finding internships in the United States. So I'm talking very closely with our embassy people back in Seoul to see if there could be any concrete programs that we can develop. Korea is not on the top list of the gender equality, so there are still a lot of improvements to do. But I would like to focus more on those issues because when I was back in the WTO,
it's a
working
necessity
on the WTO as a
when you look at
ambassador for
water
economic
scarcity,
affairs
when
there,
you look at waste
they
pollution,
had the gender champion,
everybody
which
is
is
now
like whenever
aware
there
of
is a
that
meeting
if we
or
want to
the
make a
board
conciliation
meetings,
between
you need to have the
the
gender
planet for our
balance
children
there. And also in the
economic
WTO we had
development,
discussions
we need to
about
move
the
towards
importance of
a circular
women's,
economy. And
trade,
by education, by innovation,
the world is
by a
women.
different way
And
of
when you
doing
empower
business,
women
both for
with their
citizens and
trade
also
and
by
economy,
companies,
it actually
we will
helps
make this move,
the
which will
families and
help
also
us
the
collectively
village
to
and
have
the
a
nations
planet
to develop
great
fast.
again.
So these are the areas that I really want to see further engagements and development between the two countries.
Thank you.
I just wanted to note I was also at the SED, and the gender diversity of the Korean delegation was something that I marked to my colleagues because the gender makeup of the delegation was superior to the U.S. makeup. And so I think it's having the ability to reflect and to make decisions about who is represented, who is going to have a place at the table, whether that's purely within STEM or diplomacy. Those are important pieces. And I think that the United States has had a focus, throughout, goodness gracious, a very long time on gender dynamics in STEM, and I find it really heartening that the Office of Science and Technology Policy is putting such a focus on it, specifically not at trying to have a magic bullet type answer, but looking at the issues of networking, allyship, sponsorship, and having programs that really key into specific points where female scientists have a tendency to leave the pool, including, if you're going to have additional responsibilities for parenting, how do you have, discrete grant programs that help women reintroduce themselves into the science workforce so that you don't lose out on that talent. Those programs have been need to grow, but it's a good start.
Thank you. So thank you so much. It's time to wrap up. I'd like to thank you again so much for our distinguished group of speakers. I think we cover a lot of issues, very important pressing issues that are facing not just the United States, not just ROK, but for the world. So thank you so much, and we're gonna take a break, and we will resume the session in 5 minutes on security issues. Thank you so much.
We can concentrate and focus on the security side, but I was thinking a bit on the other side that if we really go to focus too much on the security side, then it really will slow down our development. I think it is the biggest threat is that we lose competitiveness. And that is for me the whole part, because if we want to be leaders in innovation, we should also know innovation, it has two aspects. First, I think you must have great ideas, but you must be the first. So that means speed. And we must make sure that I think we have an ability to be innovative and to be the first and to have speed. So for me, that is the biggest threat for cybersecurity, to get it slowed down.
So are we suffering from eco-anxiety? The simple answer is yes, possibly too much. Eco-anxiety is definitely triggered by the fact that we are facing a very urgent matter with climate, but at the same time, it's also because we're facing something that is very complex. It's very difficult to understand the impact of climate change, and it's very difficult to understand the solutions to reach So in the world of investment where I am, what I see is that those who are actually acting every day to invest in climate change investments and low carbon economy investments are actually less susceptible to eco-anxiety because they can see the result and the impact of what they do. But really what is needed to decrease this anxiety is more examples of impactful investment, change of behavior in society that would actually bring people to less anxiety.
So bringing trilateral to Slovenian is also bringing Slovenia to trilateral. And as you know, David Rockefeller Fellows had a brief problem. It is our pleasure that we connected them.
I think we had been in a situation where U.S. and West European support for Ukraine was very well coordinated, and we were maintaining a consistent pressure on Russia to begin to negotiate seriously about ending its occupation of eastern Ukraine. Unfortunately, I think now the impeachment dynamics in the U.S. have really knocked U.S. policy off the table. We don't have the people, we don't have the engagement, we don't have the same focus, and as a result, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of Russia to negotiate. I'm hopeful that as we have a Normandy format summit, possibly on December 9th, it may take a little bit longer, that can retain some of that negotiating dynamic. But I'm afraid that right now the situation is much more difficult for Ukraine than it should be.
Liberal democracy will not survive in an unchanged form. It has not been changed enough to accommodate the vast, speedy development of the internet and of the communication technologies.
What is the role of civil society in modern Russia? I would say it's a very important issue. Why? Because in Russia, political competition is limited, there are no real opposition parties, so the society stands up to the autocratic regime through organizing itself, through building trust, through providing public goods that the corrupt and inefficient state cannot provide. And it's not just protesting corruption, it's not just about asking for democracy and rule of law. Civil society today is working on helping the poor, helping the disadvantaged, fighting domestic violence, promoting gender equality, defending minorities. So this is actually where the European future for Russia is. And luckily, with the new communication technology, with internet, it's easier to organize itself, it's easier to inform itself, and it's easier to promote change, creating new Russia that eventually will become part of greater Europe.
Never a good solution for trade, because in the long run it will endanger the competitiveness of everyone. The European
At a time when 1,000 NATO troops are stationed at the border between Estonia and Russia to deter possible Russian aggression, when President Macron is speaking about what he calls cercle concentrique, when citizens in Moldova and Georgia are questioning whether Europe and the US will come to rescue if there is a security guarantee, and when sanctions against Russia and counter embargoes have become kind of the very essence of the idea of a European security policy, well, what can we expect from Russia? We know that Putin is actually more popular than most of his competitors, but will Medvedev be a different leader than Putin? In short, can we expect a different kind of trajectory from Russia in the coming years when the bureaucratic elite inside Russia is focusing more on digitalization than what some might call modernization? As always, the views on Russia are diverging.
Developments in these last few years are showing us that the strength of the EU relative to individual countries is
is not constant over time. I believe we can say that the EU is strongest towards candidate countries. When a country wishes to accede to the European Union or to the Eurozone, it tends to follow the suggestions and the prescriptions of the EU as much as possible to make progress. And that is the moment when the magnet effect of European integration is really great, and by the way has induced countries in the past, if we think of the Balkans for example, also to establishing better relations among each other in order to qualify for membership of the EU. Then the problem is that sometimes relative vis-à-vis member states, the EU is not so strong in terms of leading them to respect its own rules as pro-Europeans would like to see. And we can even see in recent years, for example, a greater leniency in terms of allowing infringements of the Stability and Growth Pact. But then the most recent experience is how difficult it is for a country to leave the European Union if it so decides. And the monumental example of Brexit shows us that vis-à-vis a member state which wants to leave the European Union still has quite a remarkable power. We have seen in the case of the negotiations on Brexit the EU displaying really unexpected unity among the 27, also thanks to the skills and determination of Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier. And we are seeing how difficult it is for the UK to get its act together. And this, in my view, should be also kept in mind by countries here and there where governments play with the idea of perhaps leaving one day the EU or the Eurozone. They better keep in mind that it is tremendously difficult. If it is proving to be so difficult for a country of the standing, the experience, the administration,
Welcome back for those who joined us for the first panel, and good afternoon for those who are just joining for our second panel, Advancing the Security Alliance on the Peninsula and across the Indo-Pacific. My name is Dr. Mian Oh. I'm the Director and Senior Fellow of the Atlantic Council's Asia Security Initiative, housed in the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. So we are already near the end of President Biden's first year in office and look ahead to a presidential election in Korea. So I believe it would be very timely to talk about the most pressing opportunities and challenges that the U.S.-ROC alliance faces with the rapidly changing geopolitical and economic landscape, and with what what has happened in Kabul and what we have seen, the new security trilateral pact of August and the Quad summit last Friday. And last night, missile launch from North Korea has also added to the list of pressing topics to discuss for today. And all of these ongoing developments have deep implications in terms of the trajectory of U.S.-China relations, which is also going to shape the future trajectory of the alliance, including the U.S.-ROC alliance, but also of the broader Indo-Pacific. And we have a fantastic group of panelists today, so I'm really eager to deep dive into the topics and really hear this group thought about these most pressing issues. So having said that, in the interest of everyone's time, I'd like to start by briefly introducing today's panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Yoon Young-kwan, who's a professor emeritus in Seoul National University, and he's a former Korean Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade at the time. He's currently at Harvard, Belfer Center, as a senior visiting scholar, and also serves as Korea's eminent representative to and co-chair of the East Asia Fusion Group 2. Additionally, Dr. Yoon has written a lot, publishing several books, around 70 articles in the fields of international political economy, Korean foreign policy, and inter-Korean relations. And next we have Dean James Steinberg, who is incoming Dean of Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, SAIS, as well as former Deputy Secretary of State and former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Clinton.
So,
Dean Steinberg has held a
question
series
is,
of
what
other
is the
key
future
roles in the government, including as Director of the State Department's Policy Planning Staff, and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Analysis in the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. And now we have Ambassador Liebert joining us virtually. Ambassador Liebert is Senior Advisor and Korea Chair at CSIS, as well as former United States Ambassador to the Republic of Korea. His awards and decoration include the Bronze Star Medal for his service in Iraq, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and Basic Parachutism, right? He's also the recipient of the Department of Defense Distinguished Public Service Award and Department of the Navy's Distinguished Public Service Award. And next we have Dr. Sang-yeon Lee, who is the president of the Sejong Institute and president of the Korea Nuclear Policy Society. He was previously a policy advisor for Korea's multiple ministries, which includes foreign affairs, national unification, national defense, and he has written a lot on matters such as international politics and security, Korea-US relations, inter-Korean relations, nuclear security and non-proliferation, and East Asian issues. And last but not least, of course, we have Bert, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Korea and Japan. Previously, he served as a special envoy for North Korean affairs and director of the Office of Korean Affairs. And over his distinguished career, Das Lambert has served in Vietnam, Beijing, Thailand, Japan, and more. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And before we get started, I want to remind that this is open to the public and our audience to submit their questions via the Zoom Q&A function. And I'll try to draw on any relevant questions during the session. So I'd like to invite our speakers to deliver brief opening remarks, including Mark Lambert.
Thank you so much, Dr. O, and thank you to the Korea Foundation and to the Atlantic Council for this opportunity. I know you all had an opportunity to speak, to listen to Ken Moy speak from the State Department earlier today, and he sort of painted the broader picture of what our priorities are in East Asia. What I'd like to do is drill down a little bit more and look at security challenges and relate those to how they reflect on the bilateral alliance between the Republic of Korea and the United States. I think a good way of doing this is dividing the challenges into three basic parts. The first part would be the traditional security challenge. And this, of course, is the bedrock of our alliance. For decades now, the United States and the Republic of Korea have been working together to ensure the physical safety of the Korean Peninsula. This is part and parcel of the United States' commitment to resolutely oppose all activities that undermine, destabilize, or threaten the international rules-based order. Washington will regularly affirm the need to maintain an inclusive, free, and open Indo-Pacific, and we will prioritize the importance of maintaining peace and stability, lawful, unimpeded commerce, and respect for international law, including the freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea and beyond. I would like to make the point, too, that should be obvious. The United States will continue to remain in close consultation and coordination with our South Korean allies on issues of mutual concern, especially the DPRK situation. The second category of challenges that we faced is composed of the technology and information challenges that threaten our collective security. These include the disinformation campaigns that fuel distrust in democracies, as well as cyber attacks that target critical infrastructure and are used to steal intellectual property. International institutions, particularly those that set standards for emerging technologies, are under threat. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and 5G have great potential to advance innovation and bring many benefits, but we must work together to ensure they are developed and deployed in a responsible manner that respects our shared democratic values and human rights. We countries that cherish open societies and the free flow of information must work together to protect it. The final category includes emergent crises like climate change and COVID-19. These are urgent, transnational issues that affect all governments and peoples and that require a shared commitment to transparency and action. Higher temperatures, rising sea levels, increasingly extreme weather affect everything from military readiness to human migration patterns to food security. Upcoming in Glasgow, it's imperative that all countries, including those of us who are blessed to be so developed, set strong national standards that can serve as a model for others. In a similar fashion, we in the Republic of Korea need to work together to help other countries, particularly those less developed, to meet ambitious standards. This is a challenge that will require all of us to work together, including setting goals to reduce things like methane.
Well, here's what I think.
As the COVID-19 pandemic has made abundantly clear, our health security is part and parcel of our efforts to promote and maintain regional security. This is an extremely promising new chapter in our bilateral alliance that hopefully over the course of time will help us not only to address the COVID-19 pandemic, but to be better prepared for the next time we face these transnational
First and foremost,
I'd like to take a quick digression and say a few words on the U.S.-China relationship, because that's of keen interest, of course. President Biden has made it clear that we do not seek conflict with Beijing. There will be areas in which we should and will compete, areas where we can cooperate, and areas where our relationship will be adversarial. As Vice President Harris said during her trip to Singapore, our engagement in Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific is not targeted against any one country, nor is it designed to make anyone choose between countries. Rather, our engagement is intended to advance the positive vision we have regarding our participation and partnership in the region. Our economic vision is a critical part of that. We strongly support and seek to defend the rules-based order that has enabled the Indo-Pacific's remarkable economic growth and will continue to allow it. So back to the three challenges that I laid out. The question for the United States is how we begin to address them. For the United States, we have made clear our commitment to our alliances and our partnerships, and no alliance is more important than ours with the Republic of Korea. We're also committed to our shared values that sustain our alliances, including the democratic values of free speech, a free press, transparency, and clean government. This requires reaffirming those values and the foundation of international relations we are striving to protect, a free and open, rules-based international order. We're also broadening our alliances and partnerships. That begins with improving military capabilities and readiness in a way that respects human rights, along with broadening our capacity to address threats in the economic, technological, and informational realms. We can't just be reactive in addressing security and environmental challenges. We must take a proactive approach. In every possible way, the Republic of Korea is a natural partner for the United States. As the world's 10th largest economy, having a flourishing democracy and a regional power, the Republic of Korea is poised to take an even greater leadership role on both regional and global issues. Korea and the United States are seen as reliable partners by the countries of the Indo-Pacific, and we're working together to synchronize both our U.S. Indo-Pacific strategies and Korea's new Southern policies. We're working together to combat COVID-19, the climate crisis, and a host of other issues. We're also working together with the Japanese trilaterally on many of these very same issues. We are and should be ambitious about the regional and global scope of our alliance. I look forward to talking more about our perspective on this during the panel discussion. But I want to reiterate the overriding importance of working closely together with a wide array of like-minded allies and partners, including in multilateral fora. We must build strong, resilient, and broad coalitions in order to achieve our shared vision of a free, open, inclusive, and healthy Indo-Pacific, unconstrained by coercion and anchored by democratic
I would
values.
say that the characteristics
Thank you very
of
much,
a
Dr.
Nordic
O.
education system is that, first of
And
all,
now
we
I'd
have
like to
a
turn
very
to
inclusive
Mr.
system based on public funding where there should be a room for all. I think students are taught to think independently, a lot of critical thinking, and also quite a lot of creativity baked into our education. I would especially commend the Finnish system where they put their best teachers for the young students, and they use a lot of resources in preschool and also first to third grade to ensure that the children are best possibly equipped for future learning. And I believe that that's the best investment you can make, is to invest in the kids when they're really young, so you can lay the foundation for their future learning.
Military security oriented organization to non-military security oriented organization. And actually that decision changed global, political atmosphere in the Asia Pacific region.
Liberal democracy can survive the
and
current
also
period of disruption, but it's going to have to change
for the
the
Korean
volatility
to
and the
deepen
risks that we are witnessing across much of the Western world are anchored in some very deep changes that have been swirling beneath our democracies that have been coming for many years, still have a long way to run. They relate to
whether there will be
strong feelings of distrust in the political system, widespread fears over the perceived destruction of ways of life, national identity.
I thought that there was no
big worries over
major power,
deprivation, the way in which the economic settlement is playing out, and weakening bonds between the mainstream parties and ordinary voters.
Of course, we have
Those four currents have been with us for a very long time, before the Great Recession, before the arrival of Facebook and Twitter and Big Tech.
So I think
but they are now producing very substantive political effects, and they will continue to produce substantive political effects. So liberal democracy has to change. It has to make its political systems more representative. It has to ensure that people feel that their nations and communities are secure and have strong and robust external borders. And it also, over the long term, needs to devise an economic settlement that ensures that everybody feels that they are relatively getting the gains and the benefits that other groups in society are getting as well. Very big challenges.
And it will lead to boosting the legitimacy of democracy or coalition of democratic countries in providing that kind of public goods. And that will be an important strategy, long-term, indirect, but more sophisticated way of confronting authoritarian regimes in the world. So I think
so bringing trilateral to Slovenia means also bringing Slovenia to trilateral. And as you know, David Rockefeller Fellows had a great program. It is our pleasure that we connected them at the MCHM breakfast at Slovenian Business Society. They were talking about the global issues and how connected the world is with some local representatives and even some members of trilateral. It is also our pleasure that the former Prime Minister, who is the current Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Miro Cerar, had the time to meet with them and discuss where the Europe is today and where the Europe is going. And of course, we have finished our program with amazing lunch with Professor Dan Azov.
Cooperation in vaccine provision, also climate change and critical technologies, etc., etc. So, that's important, and in that regard, I am positive, but I'm a little less
liberal democracy will not survive in an unchanged form.
It
has not been changing enough to accommodate the vast, speedy development of the internet and of the communication technologies. And it has been changing too much, given the rather static nature of men.
Active cooperation between the United States and South Korea in that regard. Otherwise, the situation will continue to be unstable there. That will make South Korean policymakers as well as public opinion leaders to look for China for their possible contribution in stabilizing Korean peninsula situation. So there are some room for both allies to further develop bilateral relationship. Let me stop.
Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and thanks to the Korea Foundation and the Atlantic Council for organizing this terrific session, and to my colleagues for terrific opening presentations. I think one of the things you've heard from everyone reiterate is the hallmark of the early days of the Biden administration has been a re-emphasis on relationships with partners and allies. I think that's been enormously welcome, and no place more important than in this region because of the historical role that these have played and the tremendous contribution in terms of global public goods that stability creates, the engagement, the sense of the United States being a reliable partner is critical. And it's been something from day one that we've heard from President Biden and everybody in the administration, that it's not just the rhetoric. We've seen this in the visits, and the meetings, and the activities really showing a deep and genuine commitment. And so I think that's a tremendous framework in which to think about how to manage the challenges. I think there are three particular challenges that relate both to the region and especially to the U.S.-ROK relationship. The first is inevitably having to deal with the fallout from Afghanistan. I personally have no doubt that the decisions that President Biden administration made shouldn't be seen as reflecting on either the level of U.S. engagement in the world or its reliability as a partner. But I think it's inevitable that people will raise the question, and so it will be important going forward that both the uniqueness of the Afghan situation is explained and why that shouldn't cause anxiety about the United States' willingness to commit in a very real sense, not just political, but ultimately militarily to the security of this region. I know the administration has made an effort in that direction, but it's still a question of people's minds. The second one is one that Ambassador Lambert touched on, which is the question about are we entering the phase of post-Cold War. Again, you heard from the Ambassador that, and the administration again has been clear in its rhetoric from the President all down, that that's not the objective. It's not what we're not seeking confrontation with China. We're not trying to draw new lines, or as the Ambassador said, make countries choose sides. But inevitably, if you look at some of the activities that are taking place, it still raises questions about whether the rhetoric can be translated into reality. Look at the meetings of the Quad and the fact that, yes, they are focusing on issues other than China and military security, but nonetheless, this is a gallery of countries, all of which have issues and problems with China. Look at the new agreement between the UK and Australia and the United States. It is a military agreement. It's a security agreement. And what brings them together are concerns about China. And what we are not hearing in sort of complement these new arrangements and new relationships are arrangements and relationships that include China. When go back to the past, but when President Obama took office and made our first efforts to re-engage the United States in the Asia-Pacific region, we focused on not just reassuring and reestablishing the partnerships with key allies like Japan and Korea and Australia, but also some of the inclusive arrangements. The United States joined the East Asia Summit. We re-engaged at a higher level in the ASEAN Regional Forum. And so it was a balance between those things which included the like-minded countries which shared our values and our security interests, with efforts to make clear that this was not an attempt to draw a new Cold War-like alliance. And so I think the challenge will be to take seriously what the President and Ambassador Lambert said, that this is not what the goal is, but to be convincing in reality about democratic elections. There are ways that this can be done, but it is critical because this gets to the kind of point about dealing with relations with ROK, is that because there are good reasons why we don't want to have to make choices and have to choose sides. That the countries in the region have significant economic and political interests in China, which they want to be able to continue while maintaining the reassurance about these relationships. And so that's the third challenge is how do we develop a kind of balanced relationship with our allies who are concerned about, understandably concerned about some of the worrisome behavior of China, but also don't want to take sides. And how do we talk to each other in a balanced way about the relationship where we understand and accommodate the U.S. policies that not always identical perspective of our partners, and especially South Korea, which has such a great stake in not having those choices.
That's pretty important.
So those are the three challenges I'm confident the administration is aware of it. But it's what's going to make this going forward successful is a broader strategy of deepening alliance and partnerships. Not only in the
こちらがクリーンゲール機関ですね。はい。ライオンか。ワンダーバンド、ビーラーバンドね。ビーラーバンド。この通り、いろんな各国の情報を提供したんですね。皆さん、これ、わかる？辰巳の思うが、見えの妻でした。てこい。
Many people talk about Venezuela Institute,
さあ、て何でした。これ、水の風に連想されてるんです。そうでした。意外とコロッカス。ネゴシエーションですね。ネゴシエーション。こういうことでした。これ、松本入れたの。筋ね。高津筋ね。時に水波のことなんだけど、辻かなと思ったら、ヒデかなと思ったら。さあ、こういうことやな。ワークのこうしたいと。こちらの過去の会議なんですね。ご覧の通り、ほとんどヨーロッパで開催。今回、シャンティーリーのここにいつでも、ここね、ヒルトンホテルか。あ、そうだ、ヒルトンホテルでようやってるよね。5つ星ホテルがようあるんやけど。これが全体の、ね、グローバルグループルールって言われてるね。言われているね。チャタマハウスルールって言われてるね。過去の会議力があるんだね。これがね、これドイツ連邦共和国だね。西ドイツだ。これは英国のね。これほとんど5つ星でやってるんだけど。さあ、これフランスでやってるわけ。中心のいや、トルコでもやってるよ。これがね、まあ、ちょうど東西衛星が終わって。はい、これはね、今独立で言われてる。
South Korea. So in the future, perhaps if South Korea, even though South Korea want to collaborate,
one of the challenges we are facing
perhaps
at the moment is still
understands more
and also the priority of the Austrian presidency is security.
and also we have
So we had a good
これが田中の王さんの出席ださ
already mentioned about South Korea.
in general,
ク
we
リア
always
が
have to say on the
クリア
same
分
line.
メインと言われてる上下のまあアテネ会合でこれがプーチン出席したっていう情報もあるよね
Legal migration because Europe will need
And the current situation
still have
この後にトルコでもようやってる
migration flood in 2015 and therefore it is really important to have a good solution and then the solution which will be implemented in all the countries of the European Union to have a resilient European asylum system.
Sooner or later, Korean politics will get into the prejudice election cycle.
ご覧の通り
Said
こう
that
やって
perhaps Australia may calculate that perhaps they will
そうなのこれね
next South Korea.
Migration is currently
なんじゃ
one
ない
of the
一応やるらしいね
citizens and my belief that it will remain so, especially because migration is here to stay.
あこういうことでした
Ambassador Lippert to
Political consequences of war.
長編もこれがビルダバー会議ですね
I think, in my view, migration is needed in Europe. I think it's something that we can benefit
これねこのビルダバー会議が結作られたものなんです比較的新しいですよ1983年に結成多分ビルダバー会議でねオランダ国内でね言及してなかったのこれでねそうなベルハウトのバンハウト形成した結果
so that together we could change, as I said, the narrative and help these people, but also help ourselves to develop further.
Well, so let me just start and be relatively brief and say, first, I think it's fair to say that when President Trump was in office, there was a from bipartisan consensus that existed concerning U.S. European alliance over the last couple of decades. We had an over-focus, I would argue, on not unimportant issues, but again, perhaps too many resources, too much attention on specific issues. One, burden sharing. Two, summits with North Korea. And three, thorny trade issues. 232, 301, steel quotas, all of that. When President Biden came into office as Deputy Secretary Stafford emphasized, there was I would argue, reset towards alliances and partners in the Pacific. I think this upside-down pyramid of sort of issues around the alliance was right-sized or flipped back in an upright position, and as a result, the scope of the alliance has been expanded, or I would argue, restored to where it was end of Bush 1 or end of Bush 2, the Obama administration, to a global focus along an alliance of non-traditional environment, technology, which you heard Secretary Lambert, global health, energy. There's again a reset and a broad scope under President Biden. I would say the third point I would make is that the security issue, which again consumed a lot of time in terms of troops and costs under President Trump, back on track. I think you saw a quick resolution of burden sharing agreement, access to the THAAD site. Those issues were dispensed quickly, and much more normalized, if you will, conversation is now underway with OPCON, access to training ranges, and the future of the combined exercise program. Third, where I think there was good initial alignment after the early Biden-Moon summit was on DPRK policy, around a set of principles that include denuclearization of the peninsula, full implementation of the Security Council sanctions, the special envoy. I could go on, but you also saw that there was an application
これがクリンゲール期間ですね
that I think President Moon in terms of Tommy Johnson before summits, definitely developed.
そういうことでした
Peace on the Peninsula, permanent lasting peace on the Peninsula. We're also
ここ権力あるみたいなね
initial touches on an issue, quite frankly,
こういうことは非政府
sideways did not. And finally, I think on the positive side,
公式な
and I don't want to
声明を出す
spend too much time, but I also just have to get it in, is the people to people
ということでした。
and I think that is a critical
これが
issue in Mali.
では
And you saw it show up in
以上です。